All right, so I want, just as an introduction, I want to call out that there will be parts of this solution that we're going to show that are not relevant, namely the single sign-on and federation, because we'll be integrating instead with FIDA. So you won't be using Rapid Identity as an authentication engine. So you'll see some login screens and some single sign-on, but that's all for me to get access to different things within Rapid Identity. But I'll start by saying that Rapid Identity itself is a platform for identity and access management, and there are 3 large components to Rapid Identity. We're going to cover 2 of them, and we're going to talk about the third because it's not really something to demonstrate. But those 3 components are the portal, which is used for administrative functions, end user actions, self-service, delegation, resource requests, visibility, reporting. So there's an end user or business user or end user facing aspect to Rapid Identity. And then there is the Connect engine, which is where we're going to spend a good amount of time reviewing, which is how Rapid Identity connects to different resources like web applications, LDAP stores, file shares, right? We'll go into how we make those connections and how we bring in data, and then how we can manipulate that and apply logic to it. And then we will move into, and then we'll just talk about the third component, which is the metaverse. And the metaverse is the repository of all entity and identity related data. So first off, let me log into my production environment here. And this is a multi-factor session I'm doing here. So this is my company's production environment, and then I'll also load up our standard demonstration environment here. So if you notice here, I didn't have to put in a password, even though it's a completely different environment. The reason for that, that's demonstrating how Rapid Identity can consume an authentication as a service provider from a third-party identity provider. In this case, from itself, right? So I logged into production, and then when I went to demo, it's looking at my production authentication. So in your world, it would have been looking at FIDA, right? You've been redirected to log into FIDA instead. So just to make sure I demonstrate that correctly, then let me log out. Close my browser and do this again. Let me go to demo this time first. So this is my demo environment this time. And when I go to log in, it redirects me to my production environment. You can tell it's a different URL here. And so I have to log in here to get into the demo environment. So again, I have to do my multi-factor on my phone. I have to put in my PIN here in this example. And then it passes me through to the demo. So any questions on Rapid Identity as a federation partner? Okay. Sorry, it's early in the morning for me, so I have to drink my energy drink to stay on top of things. All right, first, so we're going to show an identity management example, and then we're going to go into how we do it. Okay, so just so we'll do the business use case first, so you understand the context, and then we'll go to the pieces that construct that. So for the first example we will do, we're going to do a new user being entered into a business source system like SAP, us grabbing and seeing that data and then comparing that to different systems to determine whether or not that identity should get an account and what sort of entitlements they need to get. So to do that, it's sort of like a magic trick. I have to show you that there is nothing up my sleeve. So this is a real demo environment with real data, and we'll work it through together. What you're seeing on my screen is a view of identities inside my demonstration environment. And Maria, if that's okay, I'm going to just use your name as an example here. So if I look for a Maria, you'll see that you don't exist. So you do not have an account in RapidIdentity, and because you don't have an account in RapidIdentity, you don't have managed identity across different systems here. So what we shall do is we're going to pretend that this is SAP. So this is just a database that we're using for demo purposes. In your world, the business process would be governed by a business system. And so we'll put in Maria here. And then just keep things simple, Maria. The accounts here delete every day at 2 in the morning, but just for privacy reasons, I'm going to use a different last name. I'll use Mike's last name because he's on the call too. And the data here, this is just example data. In the real world, it would probably be a very large data set, some of which we would get from SAP. Some of it we may be getting from other systems. We may be getting it, we may be calculating different data points and deriving different data points. But all we're demonstrating here is the HR business process of hiring an identity. And it would be the same for a student, but then obviously typically students have a separate source of truth for governing the business process around their coming and going in the environment. So all we're doing here is making Maria a professor. We're going to save the record inside the source system. And so what that means is now if I come and look at my people and I look for a Maria, you'll see that she has a record in RapidIdentity. And additionally, if I look into the data points about her, we'll see a couple of things. One, she's been granted entitlements. So these are the different entitlements that RapidIdentity has decided she should have based off of the policy and the data that we get. So we have a policy that governs who gets access to, who gets an AD account, who gets a Dropbox, a Google Apps. There are rules governing the entitlements. And we use those rules to look at the data around Maria to determine whether or not she gains that entitlement as a birthright. Right? So these would be samples of birthright entitlements. And then we also have made her a member of a few roles here as well. And then, you know, multiple usernames potentially, right? Because especially in the use cases that you'll have, an identity could be across multiple different resources and organizations, and they could have, you know, a single identity, a single username, but they may have different usernames across different organizations as well. So these can all be multi-valued that we're managing. So I'm going to demonstrate, well, first of all, any questions on the account create there, and we'll show you all the access she's been granted as well. Okay, so what we're going to do next is called an account claim. Now, I want to emphasize that the account claim is not required. It's something that we provide as a component of RapidIdentity. But the business use case for an account claim is providing a new identity, the mechanism to know their username, know their password, log in for the first time, set up any kind of information that is needed. So we provide a workflow here. Actually, we'll do a wrong environment. Okay. All right, so in my demo environment, we have multiple claim policies here. We're going to do an employee claim policy. And so normally, I want to call out that everything that I'm showing you here is an unauthenticated session to a web page. That's all this is. So we provide the web pages, but ultimately, every part of this configuration and all the functionality that you're seeing is also exposable via REST for web service integration as a REST point. So what you could say, yes, we provide all this, but if you didn't even want to use any of this, you don't have to. But if you did and you wanted to have it built into something else, what I'm showing you can be called through API. And there can be a whole separate user experience to interact with this capability here. So to do an account claim, it's asking in my demo environment for a claim code. Now, in the real world, if you're going to do a claim process, you would probably want something more than a code, right? You could have other information that you ask the end user to provide to validate they are who they say they are. And here we're just doing acceptable use and a CAPTCHA. Again, everything you're going to see here is configurable, right? You don't have to do it the way that we're showing it here. All right, so it is saying, all right, you are who you say you are. Clearly you are Maria. And then it's asking you to set up an initial password for yourself. And it's telling you your username. And then for password self-service, there are multiple mechanisms that we'll provide. This one is a security question approach, but we also do temporary one-time passwords that we can send via email or through text message. And again, the security question approach, if you're going to use that, is configurable. We just have a bunch of questions in our demo environment, but that can be inputted by the end user, decided by them, and you can control how many questions are required for them to answer, as well as how many questions are required for them to be challenged with at a reset. All right, so we're going to log in here. All right, so again, this is just a single sign-on portal here, but I'm going to use this to show you the accounts that have been created. So if I click on Gmail here, you see Maria has a new account in the ID Auto demo domain. So here's her new account. And if I go to Office 365, you'll see that she has been provisioned here as well. And we have also applied a license file here. So you can see she has different applications. So we'll pause there. So that was a new identity provision to RapidIdentity from a business source that created that identity downstream into Active Directory, Office, Google, and a few other resources. Any questions on what you've seen before we go to the next layer of how we're doing these things. Okay. And if you do have questions, feel free to jump in anytime. All right, so how do we provision to different systems? So the component of RapidIdentity that is calling out to Google and to SAP and to Office, bringing in that data, evaluating it, writing the outcomes to different systems is called connect. As you can see, we are very creative with the names of our company and our products, right? Identity automation, connect, pretty straightforward name for what it does. So connect, think of connect as a extremely fast scripting platform where the same skill sets you would need to do a scripting outcome would be the same sort of skill sets needed for RapidIdentity. The distinction there is you don't need to be a developer, right? So it's a significantly less complex way of integrating across different systems. So first of all, what you're seeing here, these are what's called action sets. And an action set is basically a self-contained scripted function, right? So you can have an action set that generates a username. You can have an action set that connects to a database and writes results to Active Directory, or looks at Active Directory and writes results to Google. So each of these action sets can be grouped into projects. And you can have different permissions within each project for different users. So you can have auditors, you can have operators, you can have administrators, and then you additionally have version history on all the change events that are occurring and by whom. And if you have the right permissions, you can revert those back, or you can reevaluate at the different version histories as they come up, which is just a fancy way of saying that it is designed for multiple resources to be working simultaneously across multiple projects with permissions per project. So these action sets can be run on a schedule. So they can be run as often as once per minute to as infrequently as once per year, right? So they can be run on a scheduled interval, but they can also be called externally by loading it as a REST point. So you can have these action sets all be called through APIs. And additionally, RapidIdentity can call through APIs. So what that means is you can have RapidIdentity tell itself to go do something at an event that it receives through a web service call. So let's take a look at these action sets here. All right. So there are two views when working in Connect. There's basic and there is advanced. Now I will tell you, people who know what they're doing hate this view. They find this view to be unnecessary. But this is a graphical view showing you all the integration sections and what it's doing. And you can interact with the workflows here and add and create and support and manage it all through the basic view. Most people who work in the solution tend to prefer the advanced view because it feels more like a scripting tool to them in this way. All right, so just to kind of give you an overview of this particular action, I'll set some concepts for you. First of all, when I click on an action in here, or I create a new action here, what it prompts me to do is provide some variables for it, right? Some input properties that action needs. So this one, for example, is opening a connection to Active Directory. So in this world, it's asking you to provide the host, the port, SSL, DN. Now, rather than having each action contain this information, the best practice in RapidIdentity is to always have a global reference. So let me bring up a global sample here for you. What the global will let you do is have a single place of reference of all these different values. And so when you're building your actions, you're just calling the global ID number for it instead of typing them in the actions. This also gives you a point to centrally manage changes. So if, you know, an OU changes or a policy changes on these records, you can centrally manage them in the global, and then all your action sets are referencing the correct updated data point instead. Right, so each of these actions here are calling the global reference, and they're moving in a flow here in this example. So you'll see that it's first opening connections, and then at any point along the way, you can have inject different actions into the action set. So these are actions. Now, an action can come from an adapter, which governs, you know, things like Active Directory, a command line interface, a database, Google, Office 365, generic LDAP, flat files, or web services, RESTful or SOAP. So these actions you can inject into the workflow, and then you just provide your properties in this. So if you're wanting to connect to a Windows server and run some PowerShell, you could come in here to command line interface, and then you would open a remote Windows CLI, and then you could have an action to run a command, right, directly against the command line. If you're working with Active Directory, it can modify records, compare them, it can get status on records, it can set policies on records, it can move within OU, it can create groups, manage group memberships, modify home drives or create home drives. It can obviously rename records and set the different policies on the record. So all your different functions that you would need to do in an Active Directory world are pre-built. Same thing on a database. So we can reconnect to a database, we can get records, we can run a query, we can update records in that database. You know, so all you would need to pull from a database or write to a database are included here. You go to another generic one here. Let's do text. So with text, I mean, if I can connect to the file server, right? So we just need to do a file connection here through connect. I can compare different flat files. I can generate flat files. I can parse through flat files to get the data necessary to run a workflow. So using that, we can move through any kind of delimited file. And then obviously a web service. So we can raw call APIs, RESTful or SOAP. So connect is that back-end connective tissue, bringing in data, evaluating it, comparing it, and writing it. Because not only does it have the integration adapters that we showed there, but it also has data manipulation adapters. We can encrypt the data. We can timestamp that data in any sort of format it's needed. We can evaluate a date. And we can get very granular in how we work with data. We can also apply any sort of logical parameters around that evaluation. So we can iterate through data. We can evaluate and continue on in the absence of different conditions. And then we can log, notify, and report against that data as well. And we can also send email notifications under some conditions or text messages, or write these events to a log or to syslog. All right, so let me pause there on Connect and see what kind of questions you have on the Connect capability. All right. So let's go back into the portal pieces here, and we'll go over the different components and what their purpose is. So we just went through Connect. Let's talk a little bit about people. All right. So this is my view as an administrator of this particular environment's people component. If I were to go to Maria's account, for example, though, and look, she has a very different view, as you can see, of people. But it's the same environment, right? So the views that a end user would have here are dynamically generated based upon their role within the portal. A couple of things to note. Each of these pieces here, these modules, an end user may not have access to any of them, right, based upon the rules that you set up. A student, for example, maybe they have access to people, but all they can see is, my professors, right, or white pages essentially that would be relevant to them. They definitely wouldn't see roles, right, or connect, or components that are not relevant for them. So you can control who sees what large components, if anything. Most users would only need to manage a profile, right? Manage their own profile, if you allow them to. So what the people module does, you can control who has access to it in the first place, but then once they're in this module, these on the left-hand side are what are called delegations. And an end user could have many different delegations depending upon their role. A delegation is a view of other people in the environment, and you can choose to delegate administrative functions to the people who have that view. So if you look at the bottom here, you'll see the actions, and if I click on the account, you'll see that new actions emerge on this account because I have delegated administrative capabilities on that account. The view of identities here is dynamically derived. So you set the policy once. Think of it as two LDAP filters, right? So LDAP filter one is who can see the tab, right? So we'll say, if say, for example, you wanted a delegation of IT help desk at that campus can unlock accounts and reset passwords for any student or administrator who is at that same campus, right?
I have to interrupt you till we have a question here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, is Connect complete in the sense that you can do all tasks in Connect actions, or do we need to use an external software components to perform certain functions?
Yeah, it should be entirely complete. You should need no third-party software components to execute a function in Connect. To be as specific as possible, though, when you're doing things like web service integrations, you might want like a Postman or some other tool set in your normal testing as you build out integrations. But there shouldn't be a requirement of those things to do functions in Connect.
Thank you.
Yeah. Right, so it would be two filters here. So one filter to determine who can see the tab in the first place, and the second is what accounts are visible there. So for that example I was giving you of a campus technician, the rule, the filter, here, actually let's just go into hold on a second here. So if I were to go into delegations here and look at some of these delegations, just to give you the example here. So this is a K-12 example, and you have a ABAC filter here, and it's saying anyone whose title is teacher. So that's a source filter. And then here we have a target attribute, which is basically saying anyone who has that teacher as their teacher. Yeah, so it's a LDAP variable here that we're looking up. So you can then create the policy once, and anyone who comes into that view will have that policy applied dynamically, right? So that the users that show up would be contextual to the viewer in the delegation. Hopefully that makes sense. I don't know if I'm explaining that well. But ultimately, the outcome is the ability to delegate different administrative tasks or look up deeper information about that identity. And in some examples, if it makes sense, to delegate the ability to manage attributes about that user. Now, this is a demo environment, so I've got some weird data points that I can just ad hoc edit. Obviously not something you would want to do in a production world. You don't want people editing people's birth dates, but that's used for just demonstration purposes here, because we have certain demonstration functions that key off of different data point changes here. So a couple of other points about this component. First of all, everything that you're seeing here, all these buttons at the bottom, are calling a pre-built function. But Rapid Identity has this concept of an alternate action. And so what an alternate action is, so today if I click change password on this account, what it's going to do is change the password, right? So that's the programmatic outcome of this particular delegated action. However, in an alternate action, all of this is callable via REST, right? So there's an API behind everything that Rapid Identity does. So all an alternate action is telling Rapid Identity, hey, I know that when you do this, it's going to change a password. However, I want you to do something else instead. And typically that means we want you to call a connect action. So if you want, so like today, if I were to change the password here, it would change it in the metavault. But the alternate action can tell it, yep, change it there. But then when you change it, take a look at all the other Active Directory environments that account exists in and synchronize the password change that you provided to those domains. Right? So everything we are doing here can call an alternate action that has impact anywhere else you want it. All right, the other key point here that we'll go through on this use case is the concept of sponsored accounts. So again, optional, don't have to use it, but the use case here is delegating out the ability to add temporary identities. So these could be vendor contractors, these could be visitors, these could be business users that don't exist in like an SAP, right? Or students that, students and business users, employees, staff, they are all coming from traditional business systems of truth. So this is designed for those identities that need access, that have no source of truth, no business system to tell you who they are, when they're coming, and more importantly, when they're going, right? This is actually built out, this use case, for a medical school in the United States called MD Anderson Cancer Center. And for them, the use case was, they have a bunch of research scientists and physicians, and, a research group needs access to some file shares. So they'd have to call IT and say, hey, can you build an account for these people so they can get access to my data? And so IT would accommodate, they'd build the account, but then no one would ever call IT to say, oh yeah, those people are gone, go ahead and disable that account, right? So one of the key use cases here is the ability to have a policy that governs a maximum time to live for that identity. And as you can see here, this time it goes out to March 8th. That's the maximum time to live by policy. And so when you provision the account, you have to pick a time within that policy. This is just an example. It doesn't have to be a date picker. It could be automatically calculated, right? We could say, yep, these accounts are only good for 90 days. Or you could even, each of these data points here, these are form items, and you can control the form, what data you want to ask, and you can control if it's required or not, right? So here you can see only email addresses and name information is required in my demo environment. But these can be drop-down menus, these can be date pickers, these can be checkboxes. And yes, so I see the question here, can users get an automated notification a set number of days before the account expires? The answer to that is yes. Additionally, too, what I always recommend, the out of the box of this is it's going to send an email notification to the sponsor and the end user around 7 days before the account expires. But what I always prefer to do on these, or recommend people do on any sort of an integration point, especially if you have reminders that need to go out, is to do them in what we call the nag action in Connect, which is, let's say an account is going to expire in, or you want everyone to change their password every 90 days, for example, right? What Connect can do is it can look at date of last password change and evaluate what the policy is. And I can see, okay, well, you are 90 days out from your password being changed. And so if 90 days, send this email template, right? So we can nag them at 90 days, nag them at 60 days, nag them at 30 days, nag them at week 4, week 3, week 2, and then nag them every day of week 5 or week 4 until they change their password, right? So you can use Connect to really, have control over the frequency of those sorts of notifications. But so the sponsored account would have an expiration date, and at the time of expiration, it would be treated just as if an employee was left the organization and SAP told us that, right? So it'd be a triggering for a downstream cascading disable of that identity across the different systems that they've been sponsored into. So once you have a sponsored account, you can transfer that account to other sponsors. You can disable it early. You can, if you choose to allow it, you can allow those accounts to be deleted. But again, the goal is to provide you a mechanism to onboard and manage identities that don't have a business source of truth. All right, so moving forward, then any other questions on the people module? All right. So I'm going to move next into requests, and we're going to walk through some of the use cases here. We'll go back to Maria's account here. All right, so we are currently logged in as Maria's account, and we can see that these are the entitlements that she currently owns. And this is the catalog of additional entitlements that, while she doesn't have them, they are available for her to request or to be requested on her behalf. These are entitlements that are outside of her birthright access, okay? But they are inside the policy of her requesting and gaining these entitlements. Again, just a demo environment. So all of that is dynamically derived, again, because each entitlement can be composite, meaning it can be constructed of multiple entitlements, but also additionally, each entitlement individually or composite have rules governing who has access to it, just like anything else here. So what we'll do, so Maria right now we have as a professor. That's what the business system is telling us about Maria. So Maria, I hope you don't mind, but we're going to change you to an IT director just to show a stark change in that role. Again, just for demo purposes here. All right, so the HR system in this example, the business system of truth, has told us that Maria is now an IT director. So what does that mean? If I look at her account in people, look here, you can see her job has already changed. And then her entitlements have changed. So let's go back to Maria's account here. And let me refresh her catalog. So as I refresh, because there's been a role change, you'll see more resources have been provided for her to be able to request. And the reason for this is that she got moved into an IT role, IT leadership role, which expanded the out of birthright entitlements that are available to her. And if I go back and look at her applications here, you'll see that she's been added into AWS IAM console. So that's a new birthright she's been granted, as well as a new entitlements view and a new catalog. Any questions so far? Okay. So each of these entitlements can be single or it can be composite. And you can have different workflows governing who sees the entitlement, what the workflow to gain it is, and how those get initiated. So let me go to my catalog here. So if I look up the details here, I can see that this entitlement has different owners, different data classifications. This one has an expiration, which means we can support an entitlement grant just like that sponsored account we talked about. An entitlement can also have a time to live. That time to live can be in terms of minutes to in terms of annual certification or in perpetuity. In this particular example, this entitlement here, the AWS console power user, has a 3-hour time to live. So upon gaining it, it is revoked automatically after 3 hours of grant. Additionally, entitlements can have relationships. So it can have conflicts and it can have dependencies. So you can say one entitlement, in order to gain it, you must have X number of these other additional dependent entitlements. Or if you own any of these entitlements, you in no way can gain this entitlement. So that gives you the ability to do segregation of duties and access dependencies as well. Now, each entitlement can also have a workflow. So this is just a library of some pre-built workflows. You can add new workflows at any time. And these are just some templates here. And when you are doing a workflow, so you can control, actually let me edit this one here, what happens in that workflow. So you can have multiple approval steps, for example, and they can go in a flow, they can go in a chain, or they can go to a group. You can call a connect action, right? Remember we talked about connect can be run on a scheduled interval. It can run through being called through API. Well, yeah, so you can call a connect action here as well to go perform a function. You can send email notifications, or you can update the form. So each one of these entitlements can have a form associated with it. And you can determine, drop-down menus, date pickers, Boolean checkboxes. So at every point along the workflow, you can change the form. So the requester maybe doesn't, you're only asking the requester as an example for, a date, right? You need this, when do you need this resource, for example? And then when the approver gets to it, they can set a final date, just as an example, and update the form, have different data points in the form as well. You can also suspend these workflows, meaning they go in a suspended state until they're told to come out of suspension through API. So using this, you can create as granular a business workflow around an entitlement, request, or grant as is necessary. Now, let me go in here as, The other part of this is access certification. Now I don't have any in my demo environment here, but you can have a view, each user would have a view of any pending access certifications that they have within their governed certification time period that they want to review. You can do bulk certification, sort of a select all, certify all approach. But you could also enroll different entitlements into rolling or ad hoc access certification campaigns, and then audit against the status of those campaigns through reporting as well. So we're about almost an hour in. What I know frustrates people is when they agree to, yep, I'm going to spend about an hour and a half here looking at this solution, and they don't see the things they wanted to see. So I want to kind of just stop here, what haven't you seen? What do you want to see more of? You know, where would you like my focus to be, or anything I haven't shown that you really want to see? And if nobody has any input, that's totally fine. That just means that you're at my mercy. I'll show you the things that I think are important. All right. So let's talk a little bit about roles then. So in a role, actually, let me show you the roles in my demo environment here. So a role is a collection of identities grouped together by a policy. And that policy is expressed like a LDAP filter, right? So it's looking at the meta directory and it's looking at the attributes about the identities to determine whether or not they are included or forced out of a certain role membership. So in this one's looking at high school students. So it's looking at saying they have to have an active account and they have to be in the following grade levels, right? And they have to be a student account. So if you meet those rules, you're a member of that particular role. So what does a role do? Well, first of all, role, like I said, is a virtual grouping of identities. Think of it like a Active Directory security group, right? So attributes govern membership, and membership then can be used to apply other policies. So as you're setting things up in RapidIdentity, go to configuration, for example, here. Let me look at password policies here. So as we look at, say, a password policy, you can determine, you know, who does this apply to? You can either do it by a attribute filter or through a role. So I can evaluate and say, if you're a member of these roles, then you are going to be governed by this password policy. Or you can also group them through an entitlement. So you could say that, you know, if you have are these particular entitlements, to gain this particular entitlement, you have to be a member of a role, or again, you have to fit a different attribute filter. So every point along the way, you can default to a role, which is a great way to centrally manage your policies. But you could also bypass that and just do attribute-based access controls at every point. So role memberships, the other important thing is that a role membership can be called via API as well. So Connect can call out, determine role memberships, and determine all the members of that role through an API call. And then we can report that back to other applications or services or data repositories as well. Now, you do have the ability to statically do exceptions. That's sort of an administrative override that you can do. So if you wanted membership managers, for example, to be able to add people to a role, so these would be business users, they can just come in, they can start adding people into their role. So if I wanted to put Maria, oops. So if I wanted to add Maria in here, so now if I looked at members here, you'd see she's pending. So at the next sync interval for this role, she would be added into that particular role as well. And so then a logged in user, probably most business users are not going to see roles unless they are managing roles. If they are managing roles, they'll see the roles module, and they would see the my roles, and they'd see the different roles they have administrative rights over, and then they can manage members in that role. Right, any other questions on roles? Okay. So we'll go a little bit into logging and reporting.
Excuse me, Tim. We have a question here. Could you show some reporting capabilities?
Are they psychic?
Yes, they are, actually.
Right, apparently. Good. Okay, that's where I was going next. So let me start by saying in Connect and in our portal, well, first let me go into Connect. So as you look into Connect here, everything that Connect is doing, it can be told to log the action that it's doing or the results of that action. So we can log that as an audit event, or we can write that to define syslog server as well. But ultimately, everything that Connect is doing, it is logging. And then same thing with our portal. So all the requests that are occurring. So for example here, let's look at Maria's account here. So I can see here, these are all the alerts that have been spooling behind the scenes. So these are log events, right? So this is showing you all the different transactions behind the scenes that we are logging about this identity. And then additionally, what's being logged is activity. So you can see all the different activities that have been done in regards to this particular identity as well. So you can see at 6:14 in the morning, she claimed her account, right? That's where we're at that point in the demo. So this is just a running log of all the transactional events that are occurring and all the different relevant alerts that have happened behind the scenes. So all that's going to a logging database in AWS. Now, you can then have pre-built reports that abut against that log repository. Actually, go back to my demo account here. So we have some community reports here, but you can also build reports from scratch. And I think I don't have it available to demonstrate here, but in January, we do have our analytics release coming out as well, which is a different view of the data. All right, so I just imported a particular report in here. And if I go to run this report, I guess there hasn't been any account creations. All right, we'll go to a different one here. All right, so this is showing you now, okay, so just so you know, my demonstration environment, every day at 2 o'clock in the morning, it deletes itself and rebuilds itself. So everything gets purged and rebuilt from scratch. So this Maria account will go away at 2 o'clock in the morning. So you're not seeing a ton of data because it's only looking at 4 hours worth of data, and no one was in my demo environment except for me. So this is showing you the different log events that occurred in that report. Now these can be exported out, so you can export these as a CSV file. But you can also move into the report and look at the extended properties of that transaction as well. So you can interact with the report criteria here. You can edit the filters on the report, the different data that's being required in the report. But all this is really doing is calling that logging database. So that's one quick element of reporting. However, I do want to point out that if you have a need for robust real data evaluation, that is also what we can use Connect for. So Connect, for example, let's say you want a report of, show me every identity that currently is disabled in Active Directory but has an account in RapidIdentity's meta directory or other services, right? Connect can open a connection to Active Directory. It can evaluate records. It can pull in a list of all accounts that have a disabled state. It can open an account to open up a connection to all the other different systems, bring all that data together and evaluate it. And it can send you a report on a scheduled interval of here are all the accounts that are disabled in your Active Directory but have access to other things you're providing, right? So we can have Connect do reporting for you in the background, but don't want to give you an impression that it's like a dashboard of reports. It's not. It would be a report that it can send you or put in a file or print to screen. All right, I'll stop there. So I thought maybe an hour and a half would be good to do demo with a bunch of questions. I'm happy to go into more detail on anything you want to see, but I'll pause here and I'll kind of hold for feedback or questions that we can go deeper on for you. And if you do have questions on the project, that'd be a little bit different. I can answer questions on the product and capabilities, but if you do have questions on project or implementation, I can ask those questions and get answers back to you.
I think that, Tim, do you have anything more that you want to show or that you think might be necessary to see or fun to see or interesting? We can always continue with the demo if you want to show something more.
Yeah.
If we don't have any direct questions right now.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to show you some other components of RapidIdentity then that may or may not be relevant, but just so you have an understanding of the product and some of the use cases. And again, I'm going to keep this broad, right? So this isn't really specific to any use cases that you might have, but just go into the other things, because I know it's probably frustrating to see me not go into some of these pieces here. So I'll show you what some of these other pieces are. So Studio is a component for managing ETLs to different curriculum applications. We use this a lot in the K-12 world, where you're wanting to share education data across different learning applications, right? These could be textbook systems, learning management systems, I think part of the challenge is in education, there are so many different application services out there, and there's no real unified way to bring data together. I'm not talking not just identity data, but course-related data, and map that back to different services. So our studio product is a component that allows us to have data providers and data consumers. And a data provider would be providing data to RapidIdentity. So those would be like student information systems, right? Anything that holds data that needs to be shared by other systems. And then you'd have the concept of a data consumer, which is anything that you want to push that data to. So think of our studio product as a large ETL engine, extract, transform, load, for education course-related services. So this is more about ETL than it is about IAM, but it is a widely used by our K-12 customer base as well. So what we'll do then from a demo perspective, so Maria, we change you to an IT manager here. All functions of the identity management play also are, what's the word I'm looking for? It's the full identity lifecycle, right? So we show to create, we show to change, we can disable that account. So we can see that the HR system has told us that they're no longer there. If I go back now and I look at Maria's account, I could see account disabled equals true. Right? So the account is no longer active in the environment. And you can see the entitlements are being taken away. So she used to have a big list of entitlements, but as time goes on, all those will be revoked as well. So now you see she's down to 1. So as time goes on, as it goes and reevaluates the memberships, it's going to start revoking her from all the other entitlements as well. All right. Well, I think that's all I had on the docket. So I'll put it back to you guys for questions or concerns. And I just got to notice that one of our engineers is on the line too. So if you have questions about implementation, we can answer that as well.
Thank you. Here we have a question. Can entitlements have different TTL? So some services remain active for students for 60 days, for example.
Yeah, so the answer there is yes. So when you have an entitlement, so first of all, you can have multiple iterations of an entitlement, right? So you can have one that's exposable to staff, one that's exposable to students. And you could say the student entitlement has a time to live of 30 days, whereas the staff iteration of this would have a time to live of 90 days. So you could have different times to live on the entitlement viewable by the person who's requesting it. But that would, to be clear, that would be different. There would be the same entitlement duplicated, but have different policies governing who has visibility to it and different policies governing time to live.
Great. Thank you, Tim.